Thank you very much for coming out today. Before I get started, I want to introduce some of my colleagues to the left. I'd like to start off with our sheriff, our Josephine County Sheriff Dave Daniel to my left. We have Captain Kyle Kennedy from the Oregon State Police, and your district attorney here in Josephine County, Josh Eastman. Today's kind of the events and how we're going to go through this. We're going to speak for about 20 minutes. We have specifics that we would like to provide to everybody, and we'll provide you an opportunity for questions, and we will do our best to answer those questions for you all, and we'll go from there. I wanted to start out with a very important comment. Our thoughts, our prayers go out to the families, the victims, the citizens, our community, everybody that's been impacted by this horrific chain of events. Your law enforcement community send their thoughts and prayers. So I wanted to start off by saying that. Also, too, it's incredibly important to say thank you to law enforcement in Southern Oregon, and our federal partners as well. I'm going to give you just a list of everybody that was involved, and if I've missed anybody from my team out there in the back, please just help me remember if I missed anybody. That is the last thing I want to do, is to miss anybody that lent their support and their equipment, their personnel, their time through these last several days. The Grants Pass Police Department, Josephine County Sheriff's Department, the Josephine County District Attorney's Office, the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, Medford PD, United States Marshal Service, and the FBI. Thank you for your assistance over these last couple of days. So what I'm going to do now is just go through some of the timeline, and you will be updated on new information, and I will pass it off to the right representative to speak to those facts and circumstances. So as you are all aware, on Tuesday, which is the 24th of January, we responded to the residents on Shane Way, to where we found a resident of Grants Pass bound and severely beaten. That sparked off an intensive manhunt over the last several days. We have worked around the clock to capture Benjamin Foster. On Wednesday, the 25th, we secured arrest warrants for attempted murder, kidnapping, and assault. And that's when we started to spool up our resources and all the additional agencies that we've spoken to and with and about today. We were heavily invested in every investigative and technological strategy to lead us to finding Benjamin Foster. We also relied heavily upon the community for tips and engagement, because without our community supporting this investigation, we wouldn't be here where we are today. On Thursday, as I know you all know this, that's the 26th, we received a tip that Ben Foster was at a residence in Sunny Valley Loop up in Wolf Creek. That turned into an all-night search and standoff, multiple SWAT teams, Oregon State Police, Grants Pass Police Department, and it was a long evening. Foster slipped out and he evaded us that night. We'll talk about some of the different evidentiary collections along the way, but you know that the hunt, the search for Foster just intensified. Your law enforcement agencies really struggled that night that we did not get him. and we were determined to figure out how are we going to compile the resources of Southern Oregon to find this man, and that's exactly what we did. We developed a task force specifically designed to continue searching for him. We immediately got the tip line up, and we had people around the clock listening to hundreds of tips and messages from citizens not only in Southern Oregon and Oregon, but across the United States. And we were committed, we are committed, we will always be committed to this community, and it was important to me and everybody here that we followed up on every single one of those tips, which is, we obviously have not followed up on all of those tips just yet, but we focused on the most important tips that led us to Ben Foster. So as we continued with this investigation over the weekend, we knew that just because it's Friday night or the weekend, we don't stop. We didn't stop. The men and women of the Grants Pass Police Department were committed along with our partners, and we did not stop searching for this man. And I'm going to move forward. I'm going to move forward to Tuesday the 31st. And this is when things started to change. We received a tip from a local cab company that a male requested a ride from Sunny Valley Loop, which is up in the area of the location where he fled from us on Thursday. And with that, I'm actually going to ask the sheriff to come up and take us through this next little element and share that with you all. Sheriff?
Thank you, Chief. Monday night, the Josephine County Sheriff's Office assisted again with this investigation by conducting or ordered welfare checks to be done, being that Benjamin Foster had not been located or apprehended in the Sunny Valley area, literally door to door. Very near the location where Mr. Foster was initially holed up on Thursday night, we discovered a double homicide scene in the 1000 block of Sunny Valley Loop. That in part stemmed from the tip coming to the city that a cab had transported somebody from that area. As a result of that, Josephine County Sheriff's Office does not necessarily have the bandwidth to conduct that level of investigation. So, as we have done in the past, we reached out to the Oregon State Police and their Major Crimes Division to begin that investigation. I will just add in part that I don't think it should be that way. I think we should be able to conduct our own investigations of that nature. So the citizens of Josephine County, I reach out to you at this time, and I ask that we got to fix that. We got to do something about that. But I do appreciate very much the Oregon State Police and their assistance with a very professional investigation that they're conducting currently as we speak. I'm not going to go into the details of that situation, other than at this point we do believe Benjamin Foster is the suspect of that double homicide, as the MO or modus operandi is very similar. To that end, I will leave it to Captain Kennedy to speak to what they have going on. Thank you.
So as the sheriff just mentioned, on the 31st, the Oregon State Police were contacted and asked to conduct an investigation into a homicide that was located in the Sunny Valley area. Several law enforcement agencies were in the area conducting welfare checks when, through an open window, they were able to observe what appeared to be scenes of a crime. They were able to make entry into that residence, and inside they located two deceased victims of what we believe to be homicidal violence. That's Richard Lee Barron and Donald Owen Griffith. Our investigators were able to work through the scene. There were some missing items, including a dog, and some other things we believe were taken from the residence. Those two individuals were processed at the scene as we would conduct our investigation. And we received further information, as you heard about the cab, that we believe Benjamin Lee Foster was then picked up around 7 a.m. on the 31st, and transported down here into the city of Grants Pass near the location of the original crime scene. Foster exited the vehicle there. We know we have some surveillance footage of him in the area. He had some property that was with him, as identified by a witness up at the scene of the homicide crime that he had taken with him down into the city. He was later located, and I'll let the sheriff touch base on the details of their interaction with him as he was back down here. I do want to stress that we have no outstanding suspects in relation to the deaths of Mr. Barron and Mr. Griffith. We believe that those are related to Benjamin Foster, and at this time we're confirming our suspicions as the investigation goes on. However, that investigation is only 30 hours old. It is going to take us a little bit of time to process the scene. Our detectives are out there, as mentioned, now actively investigating that. My understanding is that we believe blunt force trauma was the means used in this, and it's a brutal scene, unfortunately, that we're processing and see play out. I'm going to give it back to the sheriff, and he can touch base on what happened down here.
Thank you, Captain Kennedy. So, I apologize for the script, okay? I'm just going to leave the notes alone. I do better just speaking my mind. So, as you heard, we believe, based on specific facts and video footage, that Benjamin Foster made his way back to the area of Shane and Sunglow, which is the original location where this crime occurred. You can imagine the fear and the concern that came across your chief of police and every single law enforcement professional when we learned this happened. We immediately activated our SWAT team. We immediately reached out to all of our colleagues and partners to deploy people to the residence immediately. While we're deploying teams to secure the residence, we also have to take into account what this man just did. He brutally murdered 2 innocents in Sunny Valley, and we didn't know when he was going to stop. We immediately activated our alert system so we could notify all residents within a half-mile radius to shelter in place while we set up and operationally strategized on how we were going to apprehend this person. With that said, it's important to note the resources that we received from our partners in Jackson County and the Medford Police Department really complemented the additional equipment we needed. Our Sheriff's Department also utilizing some of the tools there to breach the residence were invaluable in the apprehension of Benjamin Foster. After a lengthy standoff and failed communication, he did not want to communicate with police. We located him burrowed deep underneath the home. We knew he was armed and dangerous, so you can imagine the safety of not only community, but the law enforcement professionals that were out there was our top priority. We had to be incredibly careful. We anticipated a gunfight at the end, and that's not what happened. At the end, throughout this entire process, Foster took his own life with what appears to be a single gunshot wound to the head with a .45 caliber weapon. That's when we went into recovery mode. Utilizing technology, we were confident that he was deceased underneath that house. We couldn't confirm it, but we were confident based upon what we saw that he was deceased, so we went into recovery mode. When we actually were able to physically and safely approach this man who still had a weapon in his hand, we noticed he was still breathing. So then we had to go into a different mode, a different strategy to extract him and get him to a medical facility immediately. It was very difficult to do that. He was dug deep under this house, ladies and gentlemen. It was very difficult to do. We literally had to cut into the floorboards to pull him from the home and take him to a medical facility. When he made it to a local medical facility, he was pronounced dead almost immediately. I think it was within maybe an hour or two. This was a long and arduous task. It ended with Benjamin Foster taking his own life. We are confident, like Captain Kennedy said, the community is safe. And with that said, I'll open it up to any questions. Ma'am.
Just to clarify, is there any information about the woman who was charged in assisting him and what the nature of the relationship was? And also with the victim here in Grants Pass, if you could confirm how they know each other.
Yeah, I'll start with Tita Jones. She was arrested for hindering. That's an ongoing investigation. I've got the district attorney beside me, so I'm not going to speak too much about that. So that's kind of where we're at there. We're still very comfortable with the charges of hindering prosecution on that person. And as far as the relationship with our victim, who, by the way, is still in critical yet stable condition at a local hospital, it's a former domestic relationship. Former.
So they have broken up.
I'm just going to say it's a former domestic relationship. I am not releasing her name, nor do I want to release her name. I want to protect the rights of the survivor in this case, who has a long way to battle herself toward recovery. But I will say it's a former domestic relationship.
And just very quickly, I know our national audience was very interested in the part about the dating apps. If you could walk us through how he was captured, or what role did the dating apps play in his capture?
Yeah, and that's a great question. The question is about the dating apps, and it's interesting how certain bits and pieces of information finds its way and filters its way through our community and different outlets. And the reality is that we had to share with you and the community that there was the potential for Benjamin Foster to continue using dating apps or an app to engage with somebody that might be unsuspecting. So we definitely had some leads that took us in that direction. But I'm not going to sit here and say that he was actively participating on dating apps to recruit people to help him escape and or to manipulate somebody else. Yes, ma'am.
I know you guys mentioned you guys have a limited workforce here, but you guys also mentioned yesterday that also in the Las Vegas, Nevada case, he had returned to the same home where that scene happened. Knowing that information, was your officers outside of the victim's home in case he did the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely, it was a consideration. In fact, one of our officers immediately that night took it upon himself to go over to that facility. The reality too is that we don't have enough people to staff a location for a protracted period of time. And if we did that, we're confident he was conducting counter surveillance anyway and he would have seen us. It's just a horrible set of events that led this man right back to the same location where he assaulted a Grants Pass resident. Sir, in fact,
Yeah, I actually had two questions. The first one I'll start with you. Obviously, with Benjamin Foster now being dead, obviously it may leave a little bit of an empty hole for a family that's been impacted with this victim now that justice may not be able to serve. And my question for you, and potentially this might be to the DA, is how is justice potentially get served? Because obviously this family's been impacted, this victim's been impacted. What are the next steps in bringing them some sort of justice or some sort of peace as they obviously continue to deal with the hurt and the pain of what's happened to one of their own?
Yeah, implementing justice is not my role. Supporting the community is my role, and capturing criminals and bad people, that's our role too. We will support the family, and we'll support the friends, and we'll support colleagues through this terrible ordeal over the days, weeks, and months to come. I can't speak for the family, but I would imagine, and if it were me, and I can simply say that I would certainly feel a little bit safer knowing that he's not on the loose.
And then follow-up question, this might be for Sheriff Daniel or Captain Kennedy potentially. I didn't hear specific dates on when potentially you guys believe that these two double homicide victims were potentially killed. Do you guys believe that was potentially Monday night? Was that something over the weekend you believe? Is there any evidence on when exactly they were potentially killed?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, yeah. Sorry for the back and forth. And correct me if I'm wrong, the days are kind of coming together. So now it's Wednesday. We were out pretty late last night. Our estimate right now, and like Captain Kennedy said, this is still an ongoing investigation. We still have to put a lot of timelines together, but we think somewhere in the Monday time frame. Let's go sir in the back.
When did you guys figure out that he was underneath the house?
That's a great question. So our SWAT teams, both state and Grants Pass Police and Sheriff Daniels people, are well-trained men and women, and we were slow and methodical clearing that house, and we cleared the entire residence, and he wasn't there. And we knew there was a crawl space. So as we continued that methodical search of the crawl space utilizing Jackson County Sheriff's robot, we came across several indicators that he was in there, and then we confirmed it via camera. Yes, ma'am.
I know you guys mentioned the names of the victims in the double homicide, and I understand that investigation is still going. Do we have an idea of what the relationship between the two people in that homicide are?
Okay to speak to that?
And if you could spell the names.
I'm going to ask Captain Kennedy to come up with the names. I don't have them right now.
I just want to make sure I understand your question. Are you asking about the relationship between the suspect and the victims, or the two victims?
The two victims.
So my
There is
understanding,
one with the suspect too. Just
Yeah.
both.
so at this time we don't have a connection between the suspect and the victims. There may be something that arises later, but at this time there's no connection that we're aware of. The connection between the two victims was they both lived on the property together.
And then could you repeat their names and spell them for us?
Yeah, so the first is going to be a Richard Lee Barron, R-I-C-H-A-R-D. His first name, middle of Lee, L-E-E. Last of Barron, B-A-R-R-O-N. He is a junior. And I'll give you just the year of birth is 1949. Donald Owen Griffith, D-O-N-A-L-D. For first name, Owen, middle name, O-W-E-N. Griffith, G-R-I-F-F-I-T-H. Born in 58. And just to add a little bit more information, there was one question about a time frame for these homicides. We believe because of communication between law enforcement and the victims, that occurred sometime after 3:30 p.m. on Monday the 30th and 7:10 a.m. on the 31st.
Thanks. We'll go maybe about 5 or 7 more minutes, ma'am.
If you could walk us through just how, I don't think that I understood very well, how they knew that it was him who was back at the scene, and if you have any clue,
Yeah.
any idea why he would have returned to that scene? And also, is this dog the same kind of dog that went missing, the one seen on the image, that went missing from the house where the homicides happened?
Yes. And then how did we know? Our citizens gave us video camera footage, like ring cam, and we were able to figure it out with that video footage. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I just if there's any idea of why he would have returned or any indication of why, I'm sure it's under.
No, it's a great question, and I'm happy to tell you that I would have preferred to have an interview with this man so we could figure out a lot of the whys. There's going to be a lot of full stops without any explanation, and that disappoints me. And I would have liked to have some responses to some of our questions and most of the questions that you guys have out there, but we just don't know. Yes, ma'am.
To get a little bit clearer picture on the timeline of yesterday evening when you guys were there, we were notified around 7:45, 7:50 that the incident was quote unquote resolved. Around what time? I know while I was still there, I heard what sounded like 2 shots. You said he suffered from 1 gunshot wound. At what time did you guys hear those shots versus what time he was pulled out, or you guys got close to his body enough to?
Yeah.
Could you just clarify that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have the specifics on timelines, and you have to kind of put yourself in our shoes for a moment, recognizing that we have multiple command posts established. We have SWAT operators implementing flashbangs and gas and pepper, things of that nature that make a lot of noises. So it could have happened around the same time. But then as far as recovering the body, so we just completed a very arduous ordeal and a very difficult task. And it's going to be difficult for you guys to understand without actually seeing it, how burrowed in this man was. So we have a man burrowed deep underneath a house with a gun in his hand. Very difficult for law enforcement to take him out safely. So hopefully that answers your question. We're going to delve deeper into timelines and be more specific, I'm sure, at a later date and time, but I don't have that right now. Ma'am?
Did police have any calls to the victim's residence prior to last Tuesday?
I can't answer that. I think it's no.
And was he in any way part of either of your agencies, in your radar in any way, shape, or form? I mean, clearly this person had a very violent background, and I've heard that maybe the victim herself was aware of this and was concerned. Is there anything you can speak on?
To my knowledge, no. Sir in the back.
Can you kind of shed a little more light on how the initial call developed in the first place? Did it just start with a welfare check, or how exactly did the investigation begin?
Yeah, it started with a very concerned friend, I'm not releasing her name, that went to check on her friend. And there's an array of different facts and circumstances that developed to encourage her to go and do what she did. And she went over to investigate and check on her colleague, and that's how it began. Sir in the back.
Yeah, so I know last Thursday I was out there with Grants Pass Police during that manhunt, and honestly, you was told later on that night that you guys believe he had helped escape from police custody. Is there any evidence on how exactly he was able to escape, who exactly helped him, and are you guys pursuing those leads? And does that mean that technically, even though Foster has said at this time that the investigation is not over, potentially find who exactly helped out this man escape police custody back on Thursday night that could potentially stop a double murder that, again, if you don't believe that he was involved in?
Yeah, absolutely. The investigation is not over by any stretch of the imagination. Our investigators are probably going to get a few hours of sleep, and they're going to go right back to it. We have to keep developing the timeline and figuring out what happened along the way for a variety of different reasons. But the fact of the matter is, when you're out there, if you decide to go out there and look at that area in Sunny Valley, the topography, the location of the house, the wooded area, the forest, the time of day, the weather, the temperature, you couple all this together with a limited workforce, essentially. We're not a major metropolitan area. We don't have hundreds of officers and deputies to put out there. So there will be gaps in all perimeters. And we hate the fact that he evaded capture. And that's the best I can answer that question.
So again, at this time, no information on how exactly he escaped, or any suspects, potential lead suspects, or anything like that you guys have?
There's nothing new I'm going to add to that, right?
Do we know why he was in that area? I heard his parents maybe lived there, that he was familiar with it. Is that true?
Yeah, he has connections in that area. Sir in the back.
Yeah, just a question. There was a lot of confusion in the middle that he was dead or alive. I know one outlet reported that he was dead prematurely, so I'm curious, and then there was a press release sent out about saying that he was in custody. Is that partly why police decided to put out a press release saying he was in custody at the time?
Yeah, you have to put yourself, and I'm going to speak to this one because I was the one that said it. I spoke to a reporter last night from the Daily Courier along with a couple of news outlets, and they asked me a point-blank question, is he alive or dead? I can't tell you he's dead when I know he's alive. And then we obviously continued to stay in contact with the hospital, and we found out shortly thereafter that he was deceased. Yes, ma'am.
This is more geared towards when you guys were there and maybe speaking towards how you guys can conduct operations safely moving forward. There was a long time period where you guys hadn't made contact with him. It sounds like you had cleared the home, but this man was under the crawl space and armed. Is there any technology that you guys could use that would confirm there was a body in there?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming had he wanted to, he could have still done damage from under the home with your officers in there.
Yeah, the location he was burrowed into, probably not. When you put yourself into an operational mindset, and if you've ever experienced gas that SWAT operators put into a crawl space, majority of people on this planet don't do well with it and come out. Also, too, we don't just break down our inner and our outer perimeter, and we're always maintaining that security and that tactical advantage over any scene, which is exactly what we did. So just because we think an individual is going to be barricaded in a closet, whatever the case may be, or in that house, it's not over. You stop, you reevaluate, you slow down, and you assess things. Again, he's armed and dangerous, and we are going to go slow, and we are going to be methodical, because we are going to do everything we can to go home safely that night. Next question.
Yeah, we heard reports that from neighbors that potentially it sounded like he may have had some supplies underneath the home as he may have been prepared to potentially do this at some point in time. Can you guys confirm if you guys found any sort of supplies, food or water that he had potentially stashed under there to try and hide himself until it may have been safe for him to escape?
I can confirm that with a yes. There were items down there.
Can you clarify a little bit of the timeline of the initial attack? I'm not too clear how, at what point was the victim first attacked, and then when somebody came to and found her?
Yeah, so
and he was there.
Yeah, he was there when our witness, our person going to check on her welfare went over there. He was present. He was there, and then he left the scene. And as far as how long did he torture and brutally beat a resident of Grants Pass, it's a protracted period of time. We're still figuring out that specific timeline. I've got about 2 more questions I'm good with, and then we're going to leave. Sort of back.
I noticed you guys were using some type of, I don't know if it was a SWAT team using a device that ran to kind of ram the house, it looked like.
Yeah, it's called, it was a breaching tool attached to a Bearcat vehicle.
So was it just to, what was the point of it, I guess, to kind of...
We literally had to knock blocks out of the house so we could gain access to him. One more question, and then we're going to leave.
Can you shed more light on how the victim's faring now? Is she still on life support?
Yeah, I don't want to go into the medical side of this. I can tell you she's stable and she's in critical condition, and we're monitoring her welfare regularly. With that said, I'm good with one more question. And then we're going to take off. We still have a lot of things to do.
Are there any other cases in the area where this suspect could be a person of interest? Any unsolved other cases, not from the last several days that you're looking at him for?
Currently, the answer is no. Okay, gentlemen? Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for your service. Thank you.